ES6. We will also talk about JavaScript scope, advanced control flow, advanced functions, advanced array, and modules, as well as NPM and Node.js. Okay, so some parts of these topics we will cover today, and some parts we will cover on Friday. Okay, so let us begin. And first, we're going to talk about ES6. Okay, and let me share the Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I hope you can see. So JavaScript ES6 brings. I may not. I don't remember actually. I may not told you about JavaScript ES6. So ES6 is just an ECMAScript that was brought to us in 2015. So it's kind of a new version of JavaScript. Okay, and with these new versions, we have this ES6 version brings new syntax and new awesome features to make your code more modern and more, let's say, readable. Okay, it allows you to write less code and perform more actions. Okay, and ES6 introduces us to many great features like arrow functions, template strings, class distractions, and so on. So we will have a look at, I think, the most significant features of ES6. Okay, and I would like to begin with const and let. Okay, and const and const and let. So const is a new keyword in ES6 for declaring variables. So as you remember, we previously used var in to declare our variables, right? So const is more powerful than var, sorry. Once used, the variable cannot be reassigned. So basically, you're making something constant. Okay. So let's say if I use var a and I will set it to be, let's say 2, and then I will change it to 3. That would be possible with var, because var is just a variable. It's mutable. If I change it to const like this, and then I run my code, okay, I will get error here. Okay, why? Because once it's declared, once it's assigned with the variable or with the value, sorry, it cannot be changed or reassigned or something. So it's basically a constant. So a now is a constant value, and if I would like to change it later, it will give me an error. So and that's one of the things that ES6 brought to us. Const is making something basically constant. Okay, so it becomes immutable variable. And well, it works only for objects. So if you use object here, okay, and let's say be something, and be, let's say, name, and sorry, name will be John, and age will be 25, and so on. Here, our a is a const, but also it's a variable, it's an object. So something inside of this object, those properties, values of those properties can be changed, of course. Okay, so it's only immutable when we're talking about strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, so everything except objects. Okay. And let's and let is another way of assigning or of this defining a variable. Okay, so let's say, well, let me bring it back like this. So let is another keyword that allows you to assign variables. Let's say let b to be 3, and there is now 3 keywords that we can use to define variables, right? So the first one is const, which basically turns our variable into constant. So we won't change it later. B is another way of describing. Sorry, let is another way of describing or assigning our variable. There is only one reason difference between var and let is that this one is what we call scope dependable. What does it mean, scope dependable? So when we are going to talk about scopes, I will explain it more. But basically, if you say if you will have something like for let's say if true, then let A be 2, okay, and then later on, if you will try to print it out like this, it will give you sorry, not A, but let it be B. So if you will try to print it out, it will give you error. Why? Because B doesn't exist in the global scope. It exists only in the local scope of if. Okay. So let is what we call a scope dependable. So const and let are both scope dependable variables. Okay, and var is not scope dependable. So basically, you can, if you declare var here, var b, and then you will try to print it out, it will work. Okay, but if you will try to define it with let, it will give me an error. Or if I'll try to define it with const, it will also give me an error. So const and let are scope dependable, and var is not. So that's one of the main differences between them. And it's very useful. So if you'll try to, well, define something within this scope and never use it anywhere else, so that would be very useful as well. So once again, let and const are scope dependable. Okay, and where we can use them and how. So for example, we can use const to well, for targeting the selectors. For example, when we have, let's say, a single button that fires an event, or let's say when you want to select an HTML element in JavaScript, you can use const instead of var. Okay, and this is because var is what we call hoisted. It is always preferable to use const when you do not want to reassign the variable. So let's say if you would like to choose button btn, so from your document you could say document let's say query selector, well, let's say button, right? So it will give me it will select the first button on my in my index.html, and it will be assigned to the variable btn, which is going to be constant. So later on, if I will try to assign one, I may forget. It will give me an error. So probably this button will stay forever with you. And yeah, so the next feature, so it's the first feature, const and let, are another ways of declaring your variables. Next, I would like to introduce you to arrow functions. Okay, so the arrow functions is really awesome. It makes your code more readable, more structured, and well, it basically look like modern code. So instead of using something like, let's say, function, my function, and let's say name, and then you will say return hello plus name. You may write something like this. Write const my function. Then you can write parameters, and then you just use the arrow to define that this is going to be my function, and then you say return hello. So you may see already the difference between this one and this one. Okay, so first first, we don't use function keyword anymore. Okay, instead we're using the arrow. Okay, and we're defining it just like a function expression. So we're using the keyword const, or you can use let if you wish. So if you later on may change this function. So you, in my case, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change this function. So I'm using const. I'm saying const my function, and then I'm using equal sign, and then I define parameters. So only one parameter. In my case, is name, and then I say arrow, and I open brackets, curly brackets, and I say return hello name. So what if you would have, well, let's say, two parameters? You can write it like this: name and age. So you could say hello name, I am, and you say age. Okay, so that's how you define functions with arrow. So that's what we call arrow functions. And this code looks more preferable these days because it's more readable and more structured even. Okay, and you see, you won't need to use the old syntax anymore, and especially, let's say, if you will use some arrow function, if you will use arrow function with some other built-in functions, like let's say map or filter or reduce. Okay, so let me even show you. So let's say I will have an array. So it will be an array of names: Tony, Amar, Andrews, and let's say Sean, and well, and just another value of 5, and then we will say let's array1 or array R1 to be my array map. And the old way you would do something like function, the old way you would do something like function, and then you would say item, and then you would say return item. That's the old way. Okay, so how can we do with the ES6 syntax? We will do something like let array2, which is now arrow, my array map, and we will say item. So basically what happens if we are just saying that one parameter is going to be item parameter, and then we're saying that, oh, this is a function, so we may need to return something. So we are not writing return item here, we're simply saying just item. So it automatically recognizes that we would like to return it. And if you will try to print it out, the same thing will give you the same. So this one will have Tony, Mark, Andrew, Sean, and 5. And this one will also give you Tony, Mark, Andrew, Sean, and 5. But the difference is that this one looks more prettier and more, well, let's say more readable. And it's much easier to use map, reduce, filter, and other built-in functions or built-in methods even. Okay, so with ES6 you can write shorter and smarter code now, and that's what was brought to us by ES6. Later, another things that we would like to introduce you to is template literals. Template literals. So you may already see it in my code. Template literals is, or sometimes people call it template strings even. Template strings. So we don't have to use plus operator anymore. We can simply write everything in one line without worrying about whether we miss, let's say, a white space, or we miss a variable or something. And you may already notice it in one of my functions. Okay, when I use the arrow function here, I actually already used template string or template literals. Okay, so instead of writing it now in quotation marks and then breaking it and then adding a variable, I now write everything in the same in one line. I'm not using quotation marks or not single, not double quotation mark. Instead, I use apostrophes. Okay, I say apostrophes hello, and then I use $, curly brackets, and I write inside my parameter or my variable, and then I continue. Okay, so I'm not breaking it. So once, one, and let's say two. That's the only way that's the only twice I write apostrophes. Okay, I don't write it 2 or 5 or 6 times. Okay, so in the old way would be something like this. Old way would be hello, and then you need to put the white space here plus name, and then you say and then you need to put plus one more time, and you need to say I am, and then you need to put break once again, and then you say H. Okay, you can see it looks a little bit well, not a little bit, it looks longer, but it's more confusing now. Okay, so instead of writing strings like this, you can use template strings or template literals. Okay, so you don't need to break it anymore. You don't need to use plus sign. You don't need to worry about white space because everything is just one line. Okay, so everything is pretty much as a usual string. That's what we have, and that's what we call template strings. Okay, so once again, it's just another way of writing your strings. Okay, so we can actually save it as well. So we can say let A to be this one, though it doesn't know anything about name and age. Okay, I'm just showing you this example. Okay, and it's really a huge difference between the old syntax, right, and ES6. When playing with strings, the literal strings is in ES6 looks more organized and well structured than previous version. Then I probably introduce you to default parameters as well, but let me show you once again default parameters. And default parameters we have in many programming languages, but I would like to introduce you to what we have in JavaScript. Okay, so when people usually work in PHP, they usually use default parameters. This actually allows you to define a parameter in advance. Okay, so when you forget to write the parameter, it won't return an undefined error because the parameter is already defined in the default. So when you run your function with the miss parameter, it will take the value of the default parameter t, and it will not return an error. So let's have a look. Let's say I have a function. So you may notice I'm going to use const and lets all the time, and I'm going to use arrow functions instead of the previously used function declaration or function expressions. So I'm going to say name, age, okay, and I'm going to say return. I'm actually going to return the same string here, hello, name, and age. Okay. So now, if we will call this function, it will return me hello, undefined, I am undefined, right? So that's what it will return. So if I will say my function, and if I'm not going to define any parameter, the output will be hello, undefined, I am undefined, right? Because neither name or nor age is being defined. Okay, so this function works only if we define both of these parameters. So I need to say my func, and then I need to say name. So I'm going to say let's say Claire, and let's say that's 30. Okay, so it will return, the output will be hello Claire, I'm 30, or hello I am Claire. Let's say it like this. Okay, hello I am Claire, I am 30. What happens if you accidentally forget about defining your parameters? So you forget to put some values here. It will return undefined, right? So instead, we can put what we call default parameters here. So where we have parameter name, I will put, well, let's give, by default, it's going to say Alex. And age by default is going to be 40, let's say. So if I will not define it now, okay, so the output will be no longer hello, I am undefined, I am something. It will return hello, I'm Alex. Hello, I'm Alex. I am 40. And then if I will try to put my own values, like let's say Claire and 30, it will replace default parameters with my own, and it will return, hello, I'm Claire, I'm 30. If I will, let's say, write only one parameter, let's say my func, and then I will just write name, so I will say Aaron. I will say Aaron. It will return, hello, I'm Aaron. And since I haven't defined age here, it will take default parameter 40 and it will return, hello, I'm Aaron, I am 40. And that's what we call default parameters in JavaScript, okay? So you define something by default, and when you call a function, it will first refer to the input that you have. If you don't have any input, it will refer to the default parameter that you define. And it's very useful. So the functions return a value even though, let's say, we missed the second parameter or we missed both of the parameter or something happened. Okay, so that's one of the greatest feature that we have in ES6. Now, I think the last thing that I need to show you today is array and object destructuring and probably classes. So let me show you array and object destructing or destructuring probably. So let's say we have I have an object contacts and name is going to be Sarah, and the surname is going to be I don't know, Johnson, and then age is going to be 22. Okay, so yeah, previously when, for example, we needed to take out age and save it to another variable. So for example, let age or let name to be contacts name, let surname to be contacts surname. That takes a lot of time, right? And let's say age contacts age. That would take a lot of time. Instead, what ES6 actually brings us is what we call array destructuring, so, or object destructuring. So we could say not one by one separately, but we could say possibly let array, or sorry, let name, surname, and age, and you just say contacts. Okay, what it will assume is that you will take the first value or the first property from contacts and save it to names variable. You will take the first property or the second property, which is surname, and save it to the surname variable. And then you take the third property, age, and save it to the age variable. Variable. And if you're confused, let's replace it with not a name, but just N, S, and A, and the same. Okay, so contacts and contact's name, this one, will be saved to N. Contact's surname will be saved to S, and contact's age will be saved to H. A, sorry, not H, but A. So that's what we call object destructing. Okay, and the same thing you can do with an array. So basically, with previous version, we have to assign each value to each variable, and with ES6, we just put our values within curly brackets to get any property of the object. And one thing I would like you to note is that if you assign a variable that is not identical to the name of property, it will return undefined. So, sorry. Sorry. So basically, when I try to save it like this, it will return me undefined. So I always have to use the same names of the variables as my property names. So my property name, so that's why I should use the variable name. Here I also should use surname and age. Okay, otherwise it will be undefined. And that's what you should also remember. Okay, and the same thing we can do with arrays, but instead of using curly brackets here, we should use square brackets. Okay, so we have our array here. Let me just copy it. If you want to break it down, you can say let. Well, you can use any value if you want. So you can say now with this one here is not really, it doesn't matter what you're going to call your variable. So you can call it A, B, C, D, E, right? So we have 5 values: Tony, Mark, Andrew, Sean, and 5. If you say just my array, it will return you that A is going to be equal to Tony, B is going to be equal Mark, C is going to be equal Andrews, D is going to be Sean, and E is going to be 5. So that's what we call array and object destructing. And the last feature I would like to highlight today is classes. And classes are the core of object-oriented programming. So you saw classes in Java. Okay, they make your code more secure and encapsulated. And I hope you remember encapsulation in Java, but I'm pretty sure that you remember. Okay, so using classes gives your code a nice structure and keeps it, well, basically oriented. So how do we define classes in JavaScript? And that's what was brought to us by ES6 once again. To define a class, you just simply say class and the class name, my class. And then you say constructor. Okay. So that's the basic structure of any class. So you have a class, then you have a class constructor, and you may have even some methods if you wish. Now let us create one. So I'm going to say my class, well, let's say my student, and then it's going to be name and age. So it will be this name, and this age is age. Okay, so you may create student 1, new my student, and let's look at your names. Nurbek is the first. And Nurbek, how old are you?
19.
Nurbek? How old is Nurbek? Arslan?
19.
19. Okay, great. So Nurbek is 19. And let's say our second student is Arslan. And Arslan, how old are you?
21.
Sorry?
21.
21. Okay, so yeah, you can see now we have two students. One is Nurbek and one is Arastan, and they all refer to the same class, my student, and they have the same, well, basically parameters, name and age, but they have different values, of course, because this is the student 1 and this is the student 2. And that's that's a little bit about classes in JavaScript. Of course, there are more things in classes, and probably you need to explore them more, but I'm just giving you a little bit of taste of this one. Okay, so it may work. So it actually works the same as you do in Java. So there is also inheritance. So you can have class my student, and then you can have my another class, my sub-student, and that is going to inherit all the properties of my student. Okay, and I'm not going to show you now, but you just need to remember. And there are also some methods. So we can say, well, let's say check grades. Okay, and that's going to be a method of this class. So we can say console.log checking my grades. Okay, so later on, if I'm going to say student 1, and it may have a method check grades that is going to print out checking my grades. So classes are the same in as in any object-oriented programming. Okay, that's what was brought to us once again by ES6. Okay, and that's, I think, the main features that I wanted to highlight today, that I wanted to show you. We have const and let, the two, I think the most popular, the most popular feature of ES6. Then we have arrow functions, template strings, default parameters, array and object destructing, and finally classes. All of these things are available to you without any updates. So when you start, when you're doing your code, all of the things available to you, so you don't need to update anything. It's is there by default. So every time you're opening your JavaScript, it actually being updated automatically. Sorry, it's actually being updated automatically. So yeah, that's a little bit about ES6. And moving on, I think I need to touch a little bit about JavaScript scope. I think you know this, you may know this, but let me quickly remind you what is the scope. Okay, so I'm going to share this screen with you. So the scope manages variables accessibility. So once again, const and let, what we call that's what we call scope dependable. So if you have, let's say, if true, and then you write in the code block const message hello, that's actually, and then you print out message, that's actually a local scope here. Okay, so when you will close the code block and you will return to your global scope and you will try to print out message, okay, it will give you a reference error. Why? Because const and let allows you to create variables that are scope dependable. So they exist only within this scope and it doesn't go to the global one. So in the global scope, your code knows nothing about message. So that's why we're getting a reference error. And let me show you even this one. So basically local scope B, local scope A, and global scope. So let's say if you define your variable A in local scope B with not var, but let's say const or let keyword, that variable is going to be available only in local scope B. If you define your variable in local scope A, let's say you will say let A to be 2. So A will be available in local scope A, but it also will be available in local scope B, because as you may see from this graph, local scope B is a part of local scope A. Okay? So if you define it here, it automatically goes to this one as well, but not vice versa. So it will not go to the global scope. If you define something in the global scope with the const or let, it will of course be available in both local scope A and local scope B, but not but not another way. So global scope is the maximum. So we cannot go over global scope. There is no way. So if you define something in a global scope, be prepared that it will be available in any of this one. But if you define it only here, it will be available in scope B. If you define it in A, it will be available in A and B. That's one of the principles of scoping in programming languages. I think it's available, it's actually present in many languages. JavaScript, Python, Java, and any other language as well. So that's a little bit about scopes in JavaScript. And yeah, so I'm going to stop here for now. So let's have a 10 minutes break, and then we come back and we are going to talk about another topic. Okay, so let's have a break.